Welcome back and thank you for staying glued to Trust TV. So we're going to continue talking about insecurity, but then this time we're going to concentrate on the devastating consequences of the airstrike mishaps in Nigeria, which has become a little bit too many these days. So the latest reported incident in Zamfara State, where an accidental airstrike hit the Tungarkara community, resulting in the loss of many lives, including members of the Zamfara Community Protection Guard, vigilantes, and residents in a stark or is a stark reminder of the urgent need for reform. Now, this, of course, happened in Tungarkara in Maradun local government area of Zamfara State on Saturday. So this tragic event is not an isolated one, as in over the years, Nigeria has witnessed numerous airstrike mishaps resulting to significant loss of lives and properties. In December 2023, an airstrike in Kaduna State killed 85 people and injured dozens more during a religious celebration. Similarly, in September of 2024, an airstrike in the same state claimed the lives of 24 people and injured dozens more. This incident raised serious questions about the military's operations protocol, intelligence gathering, and accountability mechanism. Underline words on the accountability. So now there is, another situation. We even saw another one happen in, I think, Sokoto State, December of 2024. Which was a sad situation, a vivid reminder. It was like a deja vu moment of what happened in Kaduna December of 2023, replicating itself in December of 2024. And then now we're starting the year again on that same note of collateral damage. Where people have also been killed. And this incident, of course, have raised a series of questions about the military's operational protocols and how we are going to prevent these tragedies from occurring in future. So questions like, what are the measures to ensure that airstrikes are carried out and how to minimize the risks, because these risks are becoming too severe for Nigeria as a country to bear. So joining us to discuss these critical issues is Air Vice Marshal Olatokumbo Adesanya, retired. He is a retired veteran with extensive experience in strategy, defense, security, logistics, communications, and military diplomacy, which would be diving into. Good morning, Air Vice Marshal. Appreciate you for joining us.
Good morning, please, and the pleasure is mine.
Right, let's hear your take on, your first analysis of this incident based on, of course, the available information that we have here in our hands. What would you say has been your assessment of what had happened in Zamfara State?
Okay, I would like to start by stating that whenever one hears any tragic event like this, it's always saddening, and I consider it most unfortunate. And I believe a well-meaning Nigerian certainly does not want to hear anything about the loss of any innocent civilians' lives. Regarding Zamfara, we have heard about, or I think I have heard about 3 different versions now. I've seen a statement from the Zamfara state government in which the Air Force was commended for clearly decimating the terrorists, while also stating that some vigilante members were unfortunately killed during the process. The other version I have seen is that from the Air Force, which also states that it has clearly been able to eliminate several bandits and that it had heard of the reports of vigilante members being killed, and of course is investigating that report. I've also monitored via Trust TV, which says through one of its tweets that he got reports from a villager that simply says that villagers were killed. So one thing that I can bring out from all these reports, since I'm not on the ground, is that clearly bandits were killed in this attack. So, which means that what will have happened at best or at worst will be that it's a case of collateral damage and not accidental bombing, as some reports have, given the impression. So, collateral damage certainly is not what any military wants, and it's very crucial. So it takes every effort to minimize or, if possible, avoid collateral damage. I would like to come back to whether this particular collateral damage, if verified, could indeed have been avoided, and then what could have been done to avoid it. But before then, let me also distinguish clearly between accidental bombing and collateral damage. Accidental bombing would be a case where we have airstrikes on innocent civilians, which where we do not have any military objective in place. So this is very, very unacceptable. And the collateral damage will be a situation where we have successful airstrikes on a military objective, but unfortunately, we have a loss of civilian lives in the process. Under Rule 14 of the Geneva Convention, the principle of collateral damage is clearly stated. It is actually a terminology that came up right from the Vietnamese War. So now, collateral damage will mean either loss of lives of civilians, injury to civilians, or damage to their property, or a combination of all. And so, it is a principle that is global. And so what every military does is to avoid it. But this damage must be minimal when compared with the level of military objective that is achieved. Where that damage to civilian properties or their lives or injury is much more than the military objective that has been achieved, or is too high compared with the military objective that has been achieved, then it becomes unacceptable and is certainly prohibited by the Geneva Convention.
All right, let's talk about this intelligence gathering. We've seen how there's a lot of quick response from the Air Force. Always, when it happens, first time there is a bit of denial. There was also in this process the same. And they say that, oh, we had a lot of intelligence gathering. So let's talk about this intelligence gathering. How important is it for the Nigerian military in general to make sure they gather information, accurate and timely in order to safeguard the life of, innocent people, talking about the civilians in a community or in a place where it's like a war zone and they want to get the criminals?
Okay, the gathering of accurate and verifiable intelligence is very critical to the success of every military operation, and particularly airstrikes. For my days while I was in the Air Force, a lot of emphasis was laid on it, and I believe that is still the case, as stated in some of the statements that I've seen released. I would not want to share, of course, some of these sources of intelligence for obvious reasons. But I know that what the military does is to get this intelligence. And I know in getting this intelligence, it also works with sister security agencies. Now, gathering of intelligence is critical to avoiding collateral damage. But in addition to gathering of intelligence, there's also the need to further confirm that intelligence through real-time surveillance. And so I'm also aware that the Nigerian Air Force has a lot of that are designated as intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance aircraft. So the usual practice is after getting that intelligence, it then sends out its aircraft, the ISR aircraft, that's intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance aircraft, to go and confirm the intelligence before undertaking the mission. Another critical element is the use of precision missions. And so, in this regard, it's gladdening to know that Nigerian Air Force has also made some progress. The Super Tucano aircraft that were purchased from the United States government have precision munitions. The Air Force also has unmanned aerial vehicles that also have precision munitions. So the whole idea behind precision munitions is to ensure that when the missiles or the bombs are released from the air, they go straight to the objective that has been acquired without possibly going outside that range to cause collateral damage. Now, having said all this, one thing that appears to be obvious in the case of this Zamfara unfortunate incident is a seeming lack of coordination between maybe the military authorities and the civilian elements on the ground. From the reports, or some of the reports available, the civilians that were killed were vigilante members. So the question is, was the military aware of the operations of these vigilante members? The appropriate civilian authorities, were they kept informed that these vigilante members will be operating? I ask this question because it's very critical. A fighter aircraft flying at sometimes more than the speed of sound, dropping munitions from the air, might find it difficult to distinguish between bandits that are bearing arms in civilian clothes and vigilante members that are also possibly bearing arms in civilian clothes. So that is why one other critical element of avoiding or minimizing collateral damage is community engagement, coordination between the military and the civilian elements, so
Yeah,
that no such
Air
operation
Vice Marshal,
should be undertaken.
talking about this, rule of engagement, that is what I would really want you to have a deep dive on for, the Nigerians to understand what is happening. You would agree with me that this is becoming one too many collateral damage situation, and it's not speaking well of, all the security agencies that we have, the gatherings, the budget that has been put when it comes to defense. For how long would we keep telling Nigerians, oh, we're sorry, we're losing lives, but then, it's because we're still fighting this banditry. So walk us through this rules of engagement. What are the rules when it comes to the Nigerian Air Force fighting counter, doing the counter-terrorism operations, and how are these rules and of engagement being monitored in order to avoid occurrence or reoccurrences of this situation over and over in just a span of 1 year? We've had multiple situations like this. How can we avoid it? How is the rule of engagement being monitored?
Oh, okay. Incidentally, what I was talking about was primarily the rule of engagement. There's a procedure that must be followed and that should be followed to avoid collateral damage. Before continuing, I would like to state that once there is war, tragic occurrences happen. And it's unfortunate, and I really say again that it's unfortunate that we have civilians losing their lives in this case, even though we also have military men losing their lives. So once it's a war situation, loss of lives cannot be avoided. And so talking about the rules of engagement, what the Nigerian Air Force should do, and I'm aware that while I was there did, and from the reports I'm getting are still doing on that process. That before it goes on any of these missions, there must be real and verifiable intelligence, which we have been told they did get. There must also be confirmation of this intelligence using intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance aircraft, which the Air Force is also using. There must also the use of precision munitions where necessary, because it's not in all cases that it's necessary. And I'm happy to note that the government of Nigeria has spent a lot of money, because precision munitions are actually not cheap. They are extremely expensive. But we're talking of life, so it's a good investment. So, but where I think there might have been failure on this occasion and looking at this specific case is coordination, which I was talking about. There have been other instances, and I agree with that it's very, very unacceptable when we have a recurrence of this situation. But it's not in all of the popularly cited instances that it's been a case of accidental bombing. There have been some that have been clearly unavoidable. Let's remember that what the Geneva Convention does is to acknowledge that it could happen. But one must always look at what is the military objective. But focusing on Zamfara, I need to find out, and I think we need to find out, the vigilantes that were operating, were they working in unison with the military bodies? Uh, I'm happy to note, though, that the Zamfara state government acknowledges that the airstrike led to the decimation of terrorists, but at what cost? So we need to know before we can even look at anything else, how many terrorists, how many bandits were killed, how many civilians were lost. So if the loss of civilian lives is too high, it becomes acceptable. But where it is minimal, still unfortunate, where it is minimal and we have a credible military objective achieved, then it will just be one of those things in war, even though unfortunate.
All right. Let's talk about concerns. I mean, I have another question, but I think I'll hold on. Let's talk about the reactions, immediate reactions of NAF on every occasions where, incidences like this happen, where they are quick without having to even investigate to say anybody that is even saying that they are civilians, then those people are terrorist empathizers. Would you say the statement that NAV releases every time this happens is addressing the concern of the Nigerian people?
Well, the Nigerian Air Force is funded by taxpayers' funds and is very much accountable to the Nigerian populace. So it has a responsibility to keep Nigerians abreast of developments. I want to believe that it releases these statements as a way of informing what has happened. To the best of my knowledge, looking at the last few statements, I have not seen, looking at the Zamfara case, as well as I think the Sokoto case, what I saw was an acknowledgement of the fact, that's from the Air Force, acknowledgement of the fact that terrorists were decimated, but it had reports of civilians lost, and it will investigate. I think that is in. So what we should also be talking about is getting the outcome of such investigations. Because, like I said, the Nigerian Air Force is also made up of human beings, and the fact that they're made up of human beings does not mean that it means it can also make mistakes. But if there are mistakes, we'll see that there are mistakes. And if there aren't mistakes, they will also see that there aren't mistakes. But I think the timely release or dissemination of news is very important, but no such dissemination of news should contain any falsehood.
All right, let's talk about accountability now, and when it comes to this and transparency. We saw the situation that happened in Tudunbiri in Igabe local government of Kaduna State, 2023 December, and they said there was going to be investigation. Now, earlier in what you said that sometimes there is accidental bombing, while other times there are things that could be avoided. So, how would you say the military so far, talking about the security agencies so far, have handled, even the Nigerian government have handled making sure there is a deep investigation, there is a transparency, a communication to the public of what really went wrong and holding these people accountable. Now, when it happened in Tudunbiri, there was a back and forth between Nigerians and the government, where the government says they do not want to prosecute, if at all the investigation comes out pointing a finger of a bit of negligence or something like that, they wouldn't want to really prosecute because that would deter the morale of the Nigerian army and air force and all of that. But then what happened to holding people accountable where at least there will be an intentional risk management, especially when it comes to collateral damage management?
Okay, I lost you for a bit there, but by my understanding of your question, I'll attempt a response. The military personnel that undertake these assignments do so at great risk to their lives. And like I'd said on another media before, military personnel have blood. They also have family members, but they have undertaken to pay the supreme price in the defense of our nation. I know from my days in the military that many of the young pilots and the support crew that are involved in these operations they sacrifice a lot, and many stay awake. And the focus at all times, which is always entrenched by the leadership, is we must do everything possible to protect the civilians. We must do everything possible to restore peace to Nigeria. So if these personnel are sacrificing so much to protect the civilians, you can imagine how traumatized they will be when these same civilians that they are sacrificing sleep day and night to protect inadvertently get killed in action. So no military personnel goes out with the intention of killing civilians in war. Now, it's also important to note that in these operations, efforts are made to always ensure that these do not happen. The morale of fighting personnel is actually very, very important because, the news we hear that makes a lot or that attracts a lot of attention is when unfortunate incidents occur. They happen, but what happens more of the time is that these bandits, terrorists, insurgents, by whatever name they are called, are decimated. And because of this, we have many Nigerians being able to sleep and go about their normal businesses. So it's important to not completely throw attention away from those victories while focusing only on the unfortunate incidents that occur sometimes. And by way of clarification, what I said earlier was distinguishing between accidental bombing and collateral damage. It is not to say that I am aware that there have been many accidental bombings, but it's just to say that sometimes the term accidental bombing is used loosely instead of saying collateral damage. Thank you.
All right. Let's talk about long-term consequences of this. If at all, this collateral damage situation continues to happen, what would be the implication for Nigeria as a state?
I think a much more important question is what will be the fate of Nigeria if this insurgency continues to go on? Because we cannot isolate an aspect of it. No nation wants to be embroiled in this type of situation, especially an asymmetric warfare. This war is costing us a lot. And the focus more often than not is on the kinetic aspect of the war, which is military operations. But we need to broaden our scope to the non-kinetic aspects. That is addressing issues of poverty, unemployment, illiteracy, ungoverned spaces, and similar non-kinetic factors, so that we can have an all of government approach rather than focusing on only the military to solve the problem. It is when we do this that we are likely to put an end to asymmetric warfare in total. And it isn't until we put an end to asymmetric warfare that we can also have a possible end to collateral damages.
All right. So based on the previous incidences that has happened that involved civilians losing their lives, what would you say has been the lesson learned so far that we can use to navigate and at least avoid or minimize the civilian casualties?
Well, one lesson which I think I've hampered on a lot during this interview is coordination. Then the civilian authorities will also need to educate members of the populace. There are known hideouts and bases of terrorist insurgents. It's important that members of the civilian populace are informed and educated to stay away from such places. We have possibilities also of civilian informants and the rest. So through adequate security, they should also be nabbed before they are able to further contribute to the continuation of this unfortunate situation. And on the part of the military, I'll encourage the military to continue to work very closely with the locals so that they get credible information before undertaking these attacks. A good step in the right direction are investments in precision munition and the ISR aircraft. So they are good steps, and I believe that they should be sustained. Also important, which is also a normal process, is that after every of these airstrikes, battle damage assessments are conducted, and I believe that the outcome, especially when it has to do with civilians, should be made public so that we'll have the possibility of reducing collateral damage or, where possible, avoiding it.
Well, amen to that. We hope we don't get to see a repeat of this horror. Our heart goes to the people of Zamfara State currently facing this. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Air Vice Marshal Olatokumbo Adesanya, retired. Appreciate you.
The pleasure is mine. Once again, I also lent my voice to the victims and the families of the victims, while praying that we do not have such again, and more importantly, praying that Nigeria is able to overcome these terrorists who certainly do not mean well for Nigerians.
Amen to that. Thank you so much.
Thank you too.
All right, that was our conversation on the collateral damage situation that happened in Zamfara State in Maradun local government, and we had a retired air marshal talking about the situation. Hopefully, we get to see an improvement when it comes to intelligence gathering and also technological advancement to avoid the situations. And with that, we will take a break on the show right now. And when we come back, we'll dive into the front pages of the National Daily. So stay with us.